Welcome back to Yin and Yang Healing. It's Kirsten and Dur, and today we're exploring beyond the physical with Kirsten. What are we talking about, girl?
Hey, I don't have like a super plan for this podcast, but I know how I want to start it, and then we'll just see kind of, I guess, where it flows from that.
Yeah, we
So
always
we
shoot
got
the
it.
shit.
Yeah, pretty much. So, yeah, we had like posted a video on our TikTok. And the title of it was "Is Hyper Independence Hurting Women?"
Mm-hmm.
And it was just talking about like being independent and like hyper independent and like this imbalance between like feminine and masculine energy. And someone had commented on our video and they said this rhetoric is so harmful. Women are both masculine and feminine. Safe relationships with men will allow her to be feminine, unsafe ones won't. And so I guess I just wanted to touch on that and talk about that a little bit, and then it kind of leads into a couple of other things I wanted to talk about, like surrounding that. And like, I don't know, I feel like that comment is it's so loaded with so many things. Like, she's right. Like, we are, and I want to clear the air on that. Like, we are, um, everyone has masculine and feminine energies. Like, I'm not denying that at all. It's just that in relationships, usually there's one person who has more feminine energy, right? Like that's their more natural state, and the other person is more masculine energy.
Yeah.
But it's like when you have two people competing for that masculine state of being, that masculine energy, that's when like you kind of like butt heads, because ultimately the person who's naturally more feminine, they're trying to get their needs met by being hyper masculine, and it doesn't work. It creates this imbalance. There's no polarity, there's no duality, there's no like opposites attract kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not to say that women have no masculine traits. Like, that's super not true, because to raise children and nurture them, that's getting an outcome. That's a very masculine quality. So it's like we have masculine energy, but it's like when you're in tandem with your partner, you can't both be masculine. It doesn't work. So I guess I wanted to clarify that piece on like the feminine and masculine energy. It's not a denying of like your masculine parts of yourself. It's just
Yeah.
about, yeah, like reclaiming the pieces that you are naturally.
And I can definitely speak to this in the sense of like being in a same sex relationship. It's like there's still this polarity of one of us is naturally a bit more feminine in energy and the other a bit more masculine in energy. So there is that polarity, but there's still instances and situations where one of us is feeling something and we need to communicate that in a feminine way, and then the other person needs to kind of flip that and receive it in a or lead it, I guess, in a masculine way. And I think that in a sense, even even heterosexual couples would experience this to some degree too, because this is like men are still going to experience emotions and have to express themselves as well. And if they kind of had an understanding of how each other could kind of support each other in that way, that would create a lot more ease in communication. Because if the man was allowed to, let's say, express his problem in a feminine way, I don't know. Wait, maybe what's your take on that? Like how should a man express his problems? Because like it's not like men don't feel shit, right? Like
Right.
they have problems, they have feelings too.
Mm,
So
right.
what would you say in that sense? Like would you temporarily reverse roles, or like how would you suggest that a couple would go about that?
It's an interesting question. I feel like it's not, I feel like I'm not going to expect a masculine man to shift into his feminine and be like, I feel sad, and I feel like overwhelmed. Like, I feel like they're not necessarily going to do it in like that same feminine way. They're going to be like, I feel fucking frustrated and this is what I'm going to do about it. You know what
Hmm.
I mean? Because that's just like how they are. They're fixers. They're fixers of their own like problems. They can still like express it, and you keep space for it. How you don't keep space for it when they're feeling like that way is when you try to fix their problems as like the
Right.
feminine energy. You're coming in and you're coming in that masculine role, but then he's shifting to his feminine role, but now he's feeling like less empowered and probably a bit weak, and probably he's not getting from you what he needed, in that he needs to feel empowered to
Mhm.
fix his own shit.
So
So
let's do a hypothetical. So let's say he comes to you and he's like, "Hey, I'm feeling frustrated. Our car isn't working properly and I don't really know what the problem is." And just leaves it at that. It's
mhm.
like, what, like, as a feminine role, how would you advise to kind of, approach that situation?
Yeah, so I just from what I've been like learning about feminine masculine communication and like those roles. I would say something like, I'm sorry that you're feeling frustrated on that. I understand you, right? I'm saying like, I hear you, I acknowledge you, right? And then I would say something empowering, like, I know that you're gonna like figure this out. Like, you're so resourceful, or you're so smart. You always know the right people. Like, I know that you're gonna um figure this out. I trust that you're gonna figure this out because you're so good at, figuring things out.
Mm-hmm.
And so on one hand, you're like acknowledging where they're at, that they feel like frustrated and they like don't know what to do. But then in the same hand, you're like empowering them to be like, remind them who they are, that like, yeah, they got this, they can fix it, they know how to fix it. You're kind of, the feminine role is like pulling them up and out of that like feeling where they're feeling like, oh, your job as a feminine is to like lift them up and out and empower them to be like, oh yeah, that's right, I fix shit and I get things done.
Oh yeah, I'm the leader.
Yeah, so you're like empowering them, encouraging them to step into like that leadership, but you're not like dismissing like how they feel, but you're not like, oh, okay, really, well, like tell me more, like why does it make you feel frustrated, like no. Don't go there.
And okay, so what about if the man asks, like, what do you think I should do? Or
I
like,
even in
hey,
Yeah,
what should we do about this kind of thing?
I would just say something like, you know what, I'm not 100% sure like what we should do. I'm sure there's lots of really good options, and I know that you're going to choose the right one. And that might irk a lot of women or a lot of people. It might irk you and rub you the wrong way to like hear that, because you're probably, if you're anything like me, like that was the other thing I wanted to mention in this podcast, that everything that I'm talking about is not me just talking out of my ass. This is me talking from my own experience, my own realizations, and my own aha moments of like, oh my gosh, I could have done things so differently. And I just sometimes I play in my mind like how things could have been differently if I had like showed up different. And it's like in my mind, back in my relationship, I was like, well, you could do this and you could do that. And I have this idea and that idea. And it was just like, oh my God. Now I look back and I'm like, yeah, I feel like the man would be really like overwhelmed by that and feel really disempowered by that, because I'm saying that I know better than you, and then you're kind of like, as a woman, you're taking like that on that leadership role of providing all the things, even if you know them. Sometimes just because you know something doesn't mean you have to verbalize everything. Like, what if you actually just empowered your masculine partner to step into their leadership and make their decisions, instead of just taking over and be like, no, I got it, here's a solution, I've been waiting to say this all day. It's like,
I do feel
call your
like that's
girlfriend,
going to
call your
ruffle some
girlfriends, call your
feathers.
friends, and tell them your solutions, and like let him figure it out.
That's definitely going to ruffle some feathers because Yeah, it's like
Probably.
if you know the solution, like if you already know the answer to the problem,
Hmm. Like, yeah, why
um
wouldn't you just say it?
well, and I guess like just from being a practitioner with emotions, I am actually kind of curious how this would play out for someone, because I know for me personally, if I were to hold that in, um I would feel like I'm holding something in emotionally as well.
Mm.
And from my experience, because I have like suffered with depression, that lack of expression can lead to depression. And so that it like that does make me very curious
Hmm.
as to like what other strategies, I guess, a feminine
Yeah.
energy could
I see
use
what
in that
I see what
situation.
I see what you're saying, and I totally understand that too, because in my past relationship, that's how I felt. I felt totally suppressed. I felt like, well, how come I can't fucking say anything or make suggestions, or like how come he doesn't take my advice even if I'm right? Like I just totally took it personal and got so butthurt by like everything. And like he would do things wrong. And then I was like, well, you should have done it like my way. And it kind of builds up like this like resentment, because it's like even if you are expressing yourself and your ideas and whatever, it still might not be conducive or like to a healthy relationship or helpful to the masculine energy who's trying to figure out how to fix the problem, right? So it's like, I guess in my transformation and in learning all of this of like feminine and masculine energy, I no longer have an investment, an attachment to me having to share those ideas to mean that I bring value to the relationship, or to mean that what I have to think or say is important. I guess I no longer have like an attachment to that, because my brain is like elsewhere. My brain is like, okay, well, if I don't have to be the problem solver and fix everything, and I can like completely release that responsibility to my partner when that's their natural role anyways, then like I can like have more time for me, and I can have more time for fun and creativity and flow and be wild and be in my emotions. I have more time, space, and energy to be like, how am I actually feeling, as opposed to being the idea person. So I guess
Yeah, that
I don't know if that like answers the question, but I just wanted to say like that's kind of how I like evolved to this place where I no longer feel like I am being suppressed. I feel like I feel good about, okay, how can I empower him to create the decisions so that further and further down the road he feels good and confident and secure making those decisions for the both of us. So I have more space inside to do all the other things that I want to do. Because creating all the decisions and ideas and everything, it does take up a lot of energy.
it does actually make sense when you do look at it from that perspective. So it's like, okay, if I have all these solutions or ideas that I feel so compelled to have to share,
Mm-hmm.
why do I feel that way?
Right.
And could it be that you have this attachment to the outcome, which goes back to like, you know, what we've talked about before, where it's like
Yeah.
if you're in the feminine energy and you're expecting an outcome, you're actually playing a masculine role. So
Nice.
it's detaching yourself at a root of it, kind of detaching yourself from the masculine outcome. And
Right.
then yeah,
Yeah, you
sorry, I
nailed it.
forgot. I
You totally
lost my
nailed it
train
with
of
that.
thought.
You totally nailed it with that you're essentially, I'm releasing my attachment to the outcome.
Oh yeah,
That
this
feels good.
also brings back the thought that I just lost. That also brings me to the point of all these women who talk about how exhausted and overwhelmed they feel.
Mm,
Actually, someone my partner listens to Glennon Doyle's podcast, and one of the things that she's mentioned in her podcast was how like women have these internal tickers of all the different things that have to be done with like the kids and the family and all these
yeah.
different things, and it's like their to-do list is in their mind 24/7 and never turns off. Well, if you were to release some of this to the man,
Right.
then you would just naturally release some of that ticker, as she calls it,
Yeah.
and like you said, would bring you more into yourself, in your how you're feeling and being creative and
Yeah.
enjoying yourself. And I'm actually kind of curious to see how that would shift for women who were in that position, if they release that, to see kind of how they would
Yeah.
transform.
And that's why I want to create a program to help women like through this, because it's when you're very attached to it, it's very hard to just say, oh yeah, just let it go. Just don't be attached to that anymore. I feel like we really have to figure out like, hey, like, why are you so attached to that? Is that your attachment? Is it somebody else's attachment? Like, what's going on there? Because like that saying of like, it's easier said than done, right? Like sometimes it's very hard to release like those attachments to the outcome and to being in control and to there's a comfort of having your list running in your mind and all the things and all your ideas and everything in your control, and you're exhausted and your nervous system is like shutting down and your immune system is like shutting down, but you're like, I don't care, I got this list and like everything's like perfect on it and I'm doing it all, and like down to like the way I take out the trash, like everything is just the way that I freaking want it. And that's a lot. It's a lot on it's a lot on
Control.
your body. And you're not in like that seat of peace because you're in so control of every little thing. And that was
Mm-hmm.
me. I was in control of every little thing down to you know, which route that we took. It bothered me that he didn't take the route that I took. Like when we drove to our friend's place, and I was like, looking back on it now, I'm like, well, why did that bother me so much? Like, who cares? Let him go whichever way he wants to go. Like, who cares if it's longer? Who cares if there's a train? Like, who cares?
It's also a
Just
little
like
bit
let it go.
obsessive
It's
compulsive
yeah.
in a sense.
It is. And I was totally obsessive compulsive with every little thing. Like my friends, like I think in the beginning, when I first asked my ex to like move in with me, they would say like a couple little things, but not as much as after. Like after when we broke up and we like talk about um like the work that I'm doing now with like masculine feminine energy, and we look back at early days in my relationship when I asked him to move in, we just have such a good laugh because I was insane. I was insane with the control, like down to like, no, you cannot bring like a coffee maker here because I don't like the smell of coffee and like I hate it. And like, no, and no, there's too many cups here. Like, you can't bring your own coffee mug. And, you have too many condiments. Like, no, it doesn't fit in the fridge. Like, you can't bring it. And just like so much control, and then just telling him like what to do and like where to go and like how to dress and like how to be. And it's just even just like talking about it now, I feel like a heaviness on my chest. It's so heavy to carry all of that. It really
It
is.
sounds exhausting.
It's exhausting. So it's like, yeah, I have my masculine energy still. Obviously, like I'm running a business and doing things and I have structure in my life. I go to the gym, right? That's structure. That's outcome based. It's directional. It's masculine. There's still parts of me that are masculine. But when I communicate with men, when I'm at work, when I'm out about in like the real world, I'd be very sure to be mindful of how I am communicating, how I am receiving from men instead of denying their gifts of giving. Right? I'm very mindful of that. And that eases me because when I'm out in public, or when I'm at work with men, I try to let them take the lead and them take control. And I have a totally different perspective where I might have been irked by it before, by their leadership and fixing and all that stuff. I'm just like, oh, so grateful because like that means I don't have to do it. And I have more energy to like talk with customers or to like be like bubbly and like energetic. And like I have so much more energy. I really do. I have so much more energy. And in that relationship, I was exhausted. I was so exhausted. And it wasn't because of lack of sleep or lack of nutrition or lack of anything. It was because I was utilizing all of my energy to be masculine and to be in control. So
That I feel like some of those words that you use is definitely going to trigger some people with like, let him take control, let him take the lead. And I feel like it's because there is this unhealthy relationship with men in general in our society, where it's like, I can't let him control me or lead me.
Right.
because that would be bad for me. But
Be
the
giving up my
point,
power.
yeah, and I think that the point that's missed in society now is that when we talk about this, it is for men who are devoted to women,
Right.
not
Yes.
men who are looking to control women, men that
Right.
are
There's a
devoted to
difference.
women, because there's a
Absolutely.
huge difference there. Obviously, you don't want to give away your control and your power to a man who wants to control you. That's not the point.
And abuse you and not consider your feelings or your emotions or your desires. Absolutely not.
Yeah. So basically, I guess I'm just putting a disclaimer out there that like we still think that you need to have your boundaries of your worth. So if a man is trying to, like you said, abuse you, control you, and cross your boundaries, that is not healthy. You don't want him to lead and control you in that way. You want him to lead and control you in a sense of devotion, because that means he's looking out for you, your emotions, and your
Right.
well-being.
Absolutely. And I will say with that, it's interesting too, because women always want to blame the man, like all the time, like right from the very get-go. But it's like we have so much power, we have so much decision, we have autonomy over our body, right? Unless you're forced into like an arranged marriage. Okay. If you're not in like that scenario, you have choice, you have power, and to act like you don't is very it's very limiting. It's very like, I'm a victim. You can say you're not, you can verbally say I'm not a victim all you want, but your actions are actually what determines how your life is, right? And so like everything comes down to you and your choices. You chose the man, you chose how quickly paced the relationship goes. Like you chose all these things, consciously or unconsciously, but those are your choices. And you can also choose to emasculate your spouse, and that choice of emasculating based on your own like fear, your own control, your own wounds, that emasculation will squash any devotion that he has to you. So it's like you might already be in a relationship per se that's like not that healthy. Maybe he is a user abuser. Maybe he is like totally in his ego and trying to control you and manipulate you and everything. But I want to preface this and say, because I talk to some people and they say, well, I can't get out of this relationship. And I want to like meet and acknowledge them where they're at in that. And I say, okay, I understand that. I've been there. I had a very hard time getting out of my past relationship. I tried very hard. It was very difficult. Like when you're in it, it's hard. But I still challenge you, even if you're in this relationship that you perceive that you cannot leave, how can you shift yourself and your energy to inspire his devotion? How can you stop emasculating? How can you self-soothe and self-nurture to make yourself feel safe, like within your own like mind, body, soul? How can you do that? Slow yourself down, get grounded, and stop emasculating him all the time. And I just wonder, I'm curious if that would make that shift, that he might start caring and being more devoted to your actual emotions. If you learn to communicate your emotions, because most women, even I talked to my friend today, most women have a tendency unconsciously to say, you did this,
Mm-hmm.
right? It goes back to our last episode from last week, that blame, right? So you're communicating in that way instead of saying, I feel overwhelmed or I feel afraid, right? They're two totally different things, instead of saying, like, you made me feel afraid versus I feel really afraid. They're
Yeah.
two
Also,
totally different things. So how can
just
he devote
pause for a
to
sec.
you?
I don't want anyone listening to think that we are advocating for women to stay in abusive relationships.
No,
That is
definitely not.
not, that's not what we're saying here. And I think we just need to really like clarify really quickly here that if
Mhm.
you are in an abusive relationship, then definitely um start making different choices to change that situation, and not saying stay in it or don't stay in it or whatever, just saying like I guess all I'm trying to say is like I'm saying we're not advocating for people to
Right.
stay in abusive relationships.
100%. But I'm not advocating for it either, but I have friends and I know people and I hear stories and it's like, I get it. It's hard when you're in it, right? Some people will say to me, well, you don't understand, Kirsten, because you're not in this relationship and you don't know how he controls me and he controls the money and he controls everything. Um, and I get that. Like, I'm just saying I understand it. But what I'm also saying is that in that, how can you find the ways to empower yourself, right? Because it's very easy to say, well, I can't get out of it and whatever. And that might be true for you based on your point of view in that circumstance. That might be true for you. And nothing that I'm going to say is going to just flip the switch for you and be like, yeah, you know what? You're right. Like, I'm leaving. So all I'm saying is that when you're in that, how can you make changes? How can you heal within? How can you work on your wounds? And how can you make shifts and feel empowered within your circumstance? Because I think that's where it all kind of starts. And then you can see where you're at after starting that journey.
Well, and I think this is a really important thing for people to understand too, is that when you're in something, it's really hard to see another perspective or another point of view, which is another reason to work with someone like Kirsten so that you can have an outside perspective and have someone's, show you things that maybe you're not even really seeing, and also
Yes.
help you to shift that mindset so that you can choose differently, whether
Right.
that choosing is leaving them or whether that choosing is you showing up in a different way.
Yeah.
It's really hard. I feel like this is why I was just saying to my counselor, I was like, practitioners have practitioners, because sometimes it's just, you just can't heal your own shit.
100%. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Even me, I'm like, I tell my friends, I'm like, okay, when I start like actually getting in like the dating game, right? I'm like, you might have to remind me of some of my own like tools, right? Because when you're in it, it's hard when you're in it.
Yeah.
It's
And
hard
I
to it.
personally write down some of the tools that like my counselor's given me for my relationship. And I have them like on the side of the fridge. So it's like when we're in that heated moment, I can go there and I can, it's kind of cheesy in the moment, which in a way is sort of good because it like breaks that ice,
Yeah.
I was like, just a sec, let me just go grab my little paper. How does that make you feel? But the fact of the matter is like when you're in a heated moment, you're dysregulated, and
Right. Yeah.
that shuts your brain off. It shuts off your memory
100%.
because you're in fight, flight, freeze, whatever. So
I feel like that's actually a really great statement. Like, I know therapists are all about like the feelings, but it's really true. And like that's the easiest way for a man to lead a woman out of her like freak out, her control, her wounds, is to ask her, how does that make you feel? Is that then she could actually look in and say, oh, I got to check in with how I feel now, instead of the blame shame game. Instead of being like, you did this and I feel abandoned. It's like, no, no, no. Like, how are you actually feeling right now? Are you feeling abandoned? Because abandonment is not feeling. Feeling afraid, feeling unsafe. Those are, you know, I don't even know if unsafe is a feeling per se. It's more like scared, afraid,
yeah,
fearful.
you can look up, I think you can just Google like the emotion wheel, and you'll see like there's kind of like you were saying, like abandoned, but it will break into more specific feelings.
Perfect.
And then
Yeah.
the outer rim is just very specific feelings.
Right. And then it mirrors with like what the opposite feeling of that is. Like, when your needs. So you have like those feelings in the wheel. Those kinds of feelings are like when your needs are not met. Right. And then the opposite of that is like what would be the opposite of that when your needs are met? So I think the second half of tuning in with your emotions is also trying to figure out, what needs am I feeling like are not being met right now? Because ultimately it comes down to our emotions and our needs not being met. That's ultimately what everything comes down to. Every fight, every argument, every disagreement it comes down to one person feels like they are not having their needs met, and that's triggering their wound around that.
Maybe we should throw that into a resources page for the peeps. So
Yeah. I was actually totally thinking that. So
yeah, so if you guys go to yinandyanghealing.com/resources, or wait, what should we call it? Resources or tools?
tools.
Tools is probably easier for the people
Yeah.
to spell.
Mhm.
yinandyanghealing.com/tools. You can opt in there and we'll have these different tools there for you.
Oh, sorry about that. I didn't put my phone on silent. Oops. Sorry.
It happens, no biggie.
Okay. Yeah, I like it.
So yeah, that's actually pretty cool because now the men that are listening have a tool that they can use. I think we've given a few to women, but men, masculine energies, ask her, how does that make you feel? Or even, what else would you like me to know about that?
Mm-hmm. And like what need isn't being met right now? Because I feel like people in general, especially men, they can honor that, and they can figure that out, and they can digest that. They can say, "Oh, you're not feeling heard right now, or you're not feeling safe right now. You're feeling unseen right now." Mm, I see. It's just so much simpler than saying, "Well, you never listened to me and you cut me off and blah 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 blah." It's like shut down. There's no communication after you start like blaming with the you this and you that. It's just not there.
Let me just clarify that for a second. Men, don't come at her and be like, "Oh, you feel unheard." Do not mimic what Kirsten just did, because that will piss her the fuck off. Something like acknowledging
I just meant
and
that like in
helping.
his brain, like not that he was saying it out loud, but in his brain, he could be like,
Yeah.
"Oh, like okay, she's feeling unseen."
And I just had to say that because from a masculine energy, I would take that very literally. And I'm like, well, that would fucking piss her the fuck off. So no, to help a woman feel heard, acknowledged, it can be as simple as saying like, hey, I hear that what you're saying is this. Like, kind of almost repeating back what she said in your own words. And that also gives her a chance to correct you if that's not what she's feeling. And then just acknowledging how you think that would make her feel. Better yet, if you could express it as like how it would make you feel. So for example, it could be like, oh, it sounds like that was really hard for you when I wore my sweatpants out. I guess that would probably make me feel kind of embarrassed if I was expecting my partner to be dressed up, but they were wearing sweatpants.
Yes.
So, sorry about that. I'll be
But
better
then
for you.
again, like even like further and deeper, like what is it about the wearing of sweatpants? Oh, that's the trigger. Like, what is it about that? Is it a fear of judgment, being criticized, not being good enough, not being worthy? Like what is that like even deeper? Well, like the sweatpants, because it's usually never about the sweatpants, or it's never about the dishes or the, whatever. There's always like something a little bit deeper there. So getting curious about what's below that. Like, because people be arguing literally about sweatpants for 2 days. And really,
Yeah.
ultimately, it has nothing to do with the sweatpants at all. So it makes arguing and talking very cyclical. Like you're just talking like in circles basically, because nobody understands what you're arguing about because it's not about the sweatpants. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And
So
I
you just
think
kind of keep on
that's,
talking about the same thing over and over, but you're not getting to like why that was an issue in the first place.
well, I think that's kind of where the the masculine energy would really have to become curious, because to be quite frank, from a masculine energy perspective, I wouldn't even know to I wouldn't even comprehend that oh, it's because you're afraid of being judged. Like that is almost just a little bit too deep for me. I would have to
Yeah.
ask. So even just saying like,
Saying like,
just
what is this really about?
remember to, yeah, remember to ask questions and be curious. And even maybe even just being a little more than what is this about? Because she might not even know that it's that deep. It's like,
Yeah.
for example, just saying, hey, like, how does that make you feel when I wear sweatpants? Oh, that
Yeah.
feels embarrassing for you. It's like, what is the embarrassing component of it? Kind of,
Right. Yeah.
just kind of digging a little deeper. And please keep in mind that it's really important to keep a nice tone with this as well, so that you don't seem degrading. Like, you don't want to be like, well,
Like,
what about that makes you
what else?
embarrassed?
Yeah. Why is it embarrassing? Like, I don't like, yeah.
Just coming at it with genuine compassion and care. Like, hey,
Yeah.
um, it sounds like I'm hearing that it's making you feel embarrassed. What I'm kind of confused. What is the embarrassing component of it? And then you might get, well, I can feel people looking at you and judging us. Oh, okay, it's about like feeling judged by other people. That makes a lot of sense.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It takes, honestly, I feel like people do need to, like, men and women do the work in this field because our relationships are so important. And to me, they're so sacred and so special. And I feel like, for lack of a better terms, we just shit all over them with like all of our triggers. Like, everyone's so triggered now. It's like, N we can just not even have a conversation about something without getting, like, triggered. Like, she's triggered about the sweatpants, then, like, he's triggered that she's triggered, like, it's just like a back and forth, and it's like, "Oh, like, let's
Yeah.
just slow down, and, like, we gotta have, some awareness and clarity and curiosity, and instead of getting all, like, triggered, like, everything is always about you and it's all personal, right? It's not personal. How can you be grounded and really be in that place of curiosity instead of taking it personal and getting, because now we're just getting like triggered back and forth because now he's triggered and his trigger is going to keep triggering her wounds, and it's just like a back and forth, like it's a ping pong game now.
Yeah, and I think, and I just want to recognize that that probably is hard for a lot of people to not take it personally and to not get triggered,
Yeah.
because the fact of the matter is a lot of us are not taught growing up how to actually deal with our emotions. It's more of like, you're fine, it's okay, stop
Mhm.
crying, this kind of
Here's
stuff.
some
And
ice cream.
we're not actually given the space to feel
Mhm.
and learn how to manage those emotions. So you're you're kind of learning it now as an adult. So
That's right.
it is a little bit harder. It is going to take more time. Have that patience with your partner. They're going to make mistakes, and seek help from someone like Kirsten, for example, that can help you start to reprogram those reactions, those subconscious, you know,
Right.
ticks, whatever you want to go. Those
Yeah,
like,
because it's like, if her wounds are healed, what's there left to be triggered? You know what I mean? And
same
if
with
his
him.
if his wounds are healed, what's there to be triggered?
Mhm.
There's not much there now. Now there's like love and free communication and freedom and liberation. Like, now that's the real relationship is there. We just have to brush off all that stuff, all of our baggage, so that we can get to that place where our relationships are easy. Because honestly, what ends up happening is we just think, well, I'll just try the next partner. Well, I'll just try the next person. Next, next, next. It's very much like next culture, like next. And it's like,
Mhm.
yeah, sure. I mean, go ahead and go like next. But it's like that saying, like, can't run from your problems. If you've got problems here and you like move halfway across the world, problems are just going to follow you. And it's the same
Mhm.
in your relationships. Your problems and your wounds are just going to keep on following you. They're going to keep on being mirrored to you. You're going to keep on choosing a partner who triggers you because your body wants it to be healed. It wants to be free from that.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That's actually a pretty important component for people to understand is you subconsciously choose people that trigger you or mirror you,
Mhm.
because it's your subconscious's way of like helping you evolve and heal and move beyond that. And the fact that if you're with someone who triggers the fuck out of you, it's because you're there for a reason. You're there to try and move through that, to heal those pieces of yourself. And for some people, it's just too much. They have to go next, and that's totally fine. But like Kirsten said, remember that it's going to follow you. Those wounds are still going to be there. You just might not have that person triggering them.
Yeah.
But
And
if
that's
you
not to
if you
say
can,
like they stay in like a shitty like relationship and make it work. Like with my ex,
right.
the bridge was completely burned. We burned that relationship to the ground. There was no salvaging it. There was no going back. There was too much hurt, too much resentment, too much hatred. It was just too much. But at least I had like taken all of that. I've done lots of emotional healing through that, lots of learning through that and evolving through that. So now the next partner that I choose, right? Not just get with, the next partner that I consciously choose, I feel like I'm in a much better place because I've worked through those things that relationship was mirroring to me about me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can definitely take a step back from the relationship and just say, okay, these are all the problems that we had. What in each of those problems is a reflection of me that I need to work on? And so
Yeah.
even if you do end up leaving your relationship to, heal whatever,
Yeah.
you need to remember those components, because those are going to creep back into your
100%.
next relationship if you don't address them. And
Yeah.
also something that I've been learning through like my relationship healing is a key component to this too, is that there's certain things that you won't be able to heal on your own. You will have to heal them with another person,
Right.
to create what's called a secure connection. Because most of us, because of the way we're raised, end up going into relationships with insecure attachments.
Yes. 100%.
And the only way to
Totally.
heal those insecure attachments is to find a partner who's willing to
Mm.
work with you to create a secure attachment.
100%. And like that goes to like the radical ownership piece too, because like that's why we're doing this podcast for the relationship component of it, because I think it's so important for people to take ownership so that you can be empowered. I personally don't believe that you can be empowered and in denial at the same time. And so if you deny that pieces of you, like in my relationship, for instance, I denied that I had any insecurity, or I denied that I was jealous, or um, just all the ways that he was. I was like, that's him. Like, he is all these things. And then when the relationship ended, I was like, those are all the things that are me still, that still need, that I thought I had like kind of overcome, but very clearly, like I had not, because they were still there and they were still very deep, heavy wounds. And I was like, okay, well, I see now why he was like sent to me, because he really reflected all of my I think like my deepest wounds. Like not the surface ones, like the deep wounds of insecurity and guilt and shame and control. Like he exposed all of that with me. And I'm grateful to that relationship, because I had to like wake up and be like, wow, like I see the piece that I played in all of that. And in hand with that too is the masculine and feminine communication, because of like those wounds, because of the way that I communicate, that also played a big role in it too. Like everything works out the way that it was supposed to work out, obviously. But I always think back, like if I had communicated differently and I wasn't emasculating him all the time, I just wonder where the outcome would have been at.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think this is a good spot to sort of summarize this episode up, in just saying that for those who are listening and are getting triggered the fuck out, or are still like, I'm not, it's all him, blah blah blah, you're probably not ready to do this work yet, because
Yeah.
that's stage one of the
Truth.
healing, the stages of healing, and that's denial.
Denial. Yeah.
And that's okay. Just keep listening
Totally okay.
and see, and just kind of just keep subscribe and keep listening to some of these
Yeah.
conversations and see if
Just
anything
keep
sort of
staying
shifts for
kind of
you.
curious.
But if you're yeah, but if you're questioning, is that maybe what's happening in my relationship? Then that's a sign that you are probably ready to start doing this healing work. And just use the links in the description to connect with us, and
I'm
we'll
so
help you
glad you
out.
said that. I'm so glad you said all of that because I think that's an important piece for people to realize if you're
Hmm.
ready or you're not. And it's okay if you're not. It's really okay.
Yep.
But you have
Everybody
to
kind of
you have to know where you're at.
everyone's healing journey, it takes different amounts of time and goes at different paths, ups and downs.
Yeah.
So it's all good. Yeah.
And I also just want to say on this too, like if you listen to this and you are triggered, or you have any questions or need clarification on things, like share with us, let us know, like send us a message, send us a DM on our socials. I definitely like want to hear from you, how you got triggered, why you got triggered, like what's going on for you when you hear this podcast. I'm just so curious on that. So please reach out to us.
Yeah, if you're on Spotify, you can actually even send us or a little voice message. That would be super sweet. I would love to receive some voice messages from people. No
Yes.
matter what you want to, no matter what you want to say to us, good or bad.
Yeah,
It would
exactly.
just be awesome to hear people's voices and hear what you have to say.
I just had an idea actually, like with that, and then how before in our first podcast we were saying, um, if you email us and you get on my email list and I do review for like your text message, I would love if someone like honestly wanted to um pop in for a small portion of our podcast and just like kind of go through their relationship and we could kind of talk it through and I could just like point out some patterns and some things. That would be so cool. So I want to like put
Yes.
that out there too. If anyone wants to like hop on our podcast with us for maybe like 5 or 10 minutes and just talk about um maybe a certain very particular circumstance or scenario in your relationship that you would need some guidance on, let us know.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
connect with us. We'd love to have you on the show and help you heal some of those pieces of your relationship.
Yes. I love it.
Awesome. Well,
I want to
thanks.
say just before we go, I do want to say in my own journey of taking ownership, um, and learning about this masculine and feminine communication and learning where I naturally feel best, which is more in my feminine energy. In learning all of that and being at this place now, I just feel so light. I feel so good. I feel like that's like the best way to describe it. It's like that sigh. Like I just feel so great. And I just want to help other women like have that sensation, like that feeling of like letting that all go, being their true, authentic, feminine self. And yeah.
Awesome. You want to close this out, Kirsten?
Yeah. Thanks for joining us today, whether you're watching or listening. And stay tuned for our next podcast.